Fantastic. All right, so getting unstuck. So as I said at the beginning, kia ora koutou, I'm Christine Sheehy, book coach. For those of you who haven't met me before, I think most of you that are here online have met me or worked with me before. And today I wanted to host this quick coaching clinic on getting unstuck because this is something that happens to all writers, myself included. So if you are feeling that you are stuck in your project, that you've lost some momentum, that you don't know how to pick it up again, you're wondering if this is any good, or you're feeling like, maybe because you're stuck, that your book isn't good enough, nobody will care, or you're not a real writer. In fact, the opposite might well be true because all writers get stuck from time to time, and the key is not to stay there. And I want you to please give yourself some grace for showing up today for yourself and for your book, because that in itself is something that you took the time to actually come along and look this in the face, look this in the eye. It's really easy for creative dreams to fall by the wayside for all kinds of reasons, and we'll go through a few of them today. If you've got a notebook and pen handy, that would be great, or you can just take some little notes on your phone. I'd just like you to pay attention to anything that resonates as we go through this little presentation. As I said at the beginning, for those of you who were here, this is what we will cover. We're going to just talk about common reasons why we lose momentum on our creative projects. We're going to talk about some ways that you can get back on track. We're going to ignore my spelling mistakes there on the top. And we are going to identify your next small step, just a small step to get you back in touch with that project. Because one thing I like to say to my clients is that you've got to keep touching the work. If you keep just even for a few minutes here and there, keeping in touch with the work, that will make a huge difference to just moving you forward. So we want to find just one small step that we can get you moving forward again. And at the end, we'll do Q&A. I will stop the recording for the Q&A so that we can just talk about projects for those who are here live on the call. Just check that no one else is joining us. Okay, so why we lose momentum? Here's a couple of reasons. So the first obvious one is that life gets in the way. A lot of us have caregiving responsibilities, either for loved ones, even animals, or older loved ones, younger loved ones. We've got voluntary work that we're doing. We've got unexpected things that pop up in our own lives, legal disputes or weather events, any kind of thing can get in the way of your creative project. Life is busy. There are always other things that could be your top priority or that are begging for your attention. So if that's happened to you, that's just an acknowledgement that that's the case for all of us. And it's okay. You can keep touching the work, you can keep coming back to that creative project. Life isn't going to stop because you want to write a book, but you can find a way to keep coming back to it. The second thing is that the vision doesn't meet reality, and this can happen in a few ways. So one might be that you're really excited and inspired when you start out writing the book. You've got this idea of what it will be like to write a book, and actually it ends up not feeling that way. The words aren't flowing, you don't feel like it's gelling, or you're not enjoying the process of sitting at your desk. Something isn't panning out for you. So that's the vision of being a writer or working on the book doesn't feel like you expected. Or it can be that the words that are coming out, you're not happy with them. They're not how you want them to feel, or it's not reading as well as you thought that it might. Ira Glass has a lovely comment that is about beginning writers, and he says that when you start out, your taste is better than, I think he says your taste is better than your skill. So you'll want to write a book because you're probably a reader or you appreciate books, you appreciate ideas and the way that they are shared. And when you start to do it yourself, you might find that your skill just doesn't match up to your taste. So there's a mismatch there where your vision doesn't quite live up to the reality, or the other way around, the reality doesn't live up to the vision. But that's something that will improve as you build on your skill level. So it's about bringing your skills along, getting clearer on what it is that you want to say, shaping those words on the page. Your words can match your taste, but they might not at the beginning, and to understand that that is the same for everybody. Writing is a skill like any other that we work at and build over time. And over words on the page, right? And that can lead into perfectionism. And this is one that I fall into a lot, where I redo the first chapter 17 times. and I keep polishing the same sections and making those pretty and lovely, and I don't move forward, and I'm just sort of stuck in this loop of working on the same material. So if that's you, that's very common as well. And that can lead on to avoiding the tough stuff. And what I mean by this is there's various ways material can be tough to write. One, it might be complex, really difficult ideas that you're trying to make engaging and interesting, and it just isn't really working, or it's just a really hard piece that you don't want to tackle. And we've got to kind of write through that bit to get to the other side, but we don't really want to do it. So we're kind of avoiding that material. Or it could be because there's a part of your story that you need to tell or you want to tell for that part of the book, and that's uncomfortable and that's bringing up feelings or triggering things in you, or just you're just not sure if you want to expose yourself in that way. So we can avoid the tough things by just, polishing this part over and over and over and not moving through that piece. Um, you might be that the structure really isn't working. Something just isn't right, and you can't put your finger on what it is. So that can keep us stuck. And then there is the old fear of failure or imposter syndrome. So the closer you get towards finishing the book, the more that fear can pipe up. I've had clients work on a book for more than a year, have it right almost to the finish line, and then be hit by this sudden bout of self-doubt, fear. What am I doing? I mean, even clients who've had contracts with publishers, they're ready to go. Someone's backing the book, waiting for the book, and this wave of fear hits at the end. And it's the sense of who am I to write this and who's even going to care? And that it's almost like Brené Brown talks about the vulnerability hangover, but it's almost like anticipatory vulnerability of putting a creative work into the world. It's real and it's really common and part of the process. So working through those uncomfortable feelings is really important. Now, there's where you are in your book and your project. Some of these may land, some of them may not. And maybe there's something else. So I guess the step now is to identify like which of these reasons resonates for you. Love you just to jot that down. If you want to share it in the chat, that's great. But if you want to just keep that for yourself, that's fine as well. It may be none of these reasons. It may be something else. But just have a little think for a second and just jot down what you think it is that might be keeping you stuck. We talked about life getting in the way, that gap between vision and reality, either of being a writer or of the quality of the work you're producing, perfectionism, avoiding the tough stuff, worrying about sharing your personal story, structure issues, or that fear of failure. Yeah, perfectionism and life demands. I think that's really common. Life, there's always something to do. Work is getting in the way, you've got an income that you need to make, all of those things. And so it's really easy for this sort of project to just slide away. And so that's why we need to, yep, life demands and fear of failure. Yep. I mean, these are all true for me as well, right? Fear of failure for sure. Yeah. Yeah. Or it's going to go nowhere is the other thing, because we never know what it's going to do. Like any creative work, it is definitely a leap of faith and courage to believe that you can do it. Yeah, Emma says the structure I thought would work is not working, and that made me question the whole book. Yeah. Okay, that's interesting insight. And sometimes you do have to work on something to find your way through the puzzle. So sometimes you kind of have to go down a path to realize actually this isn't the way that I want it to go, or it's not working. So how can we peel that back? So you and I can talk about that, Emma. Cool. Okay. All right, so here's a few things. I'm going to suggest some ways that you can get unstuck today. I'm not expecting you to do them all. They're not all going to resonate for all of you. What I'd like you to leave this session with is kind of having one thing that you're going to do, and it might be something that's inspired by what we say today, but isn't on this list. But I'm going to take you through some common ways that you can get unstuck. So the first one is to reconnect to your why. And I know we hear this concept of your why everywhere in every or I feel like we do in every context today. But knowing why you're doing something is so important. And it can feel really lofty and it can feel like, I don't know, hard to maybe dial into sometimes. But the reason why you're writing this book is really important. And that why needs to go beyond just, I want to write a book, right? Like, what is it you're offering to the world? What is it that's going to inspire your readers? That's going to make them do something differently, that's going to get them to take a different step, a new step forward. In the case of Michelle, I know Michelle's writing fiction. Um, how is that story? What is it about that story that drives you to want to tell it? And so knowing who this book is for and how it will help them or inspire them or leave them feeling differently is so important. So a task you can do there is to just write a letter to your reader. Some of you will have done my 60 seconds in a microphone exercise before, where you visualize that reader and talk to them about why, how you want their life to shift, or what you want them to learn through this work. Just reconnecting to that few minutes in your journal can be really important. And so writing that letter to your reader about what you want for them from this work can be a really powerful exercise. Even just a few minutes before you start writing, just journaling on that why can really help to connect you to that purpose before you sit down at your desk. So that's the first one. Second one is just to encourage you to lower the bar, permission to write badly. Now, it's often said you can't edit a blank page. You've got to get something down before you can start. And then and Anne Lamott, she talks about writing your shitty first draft, like just get it out there. And using a timer can be really useful there. 20 minutes. I'm going to write this section, not the whole chapter, not the whole book, not the whole. I'm just going to write about this topic. I'm going to give myself 20 minutes or 30 minutes, whatever you have, and see where I get to, and then just go for it. See what you can get down in that time frame. Sometimes it can really help to actually dictate it, to just go for a walk around the block and record a voice message in your phone, talk out that idea or that chapter, and then come home. You can get it, you can transcribe it. There's tools now, AI and so on, that could do that for you and see what's there. And that can help you sometimes to find your way through a really tricky issue. But it doesn't need to be perfect. What you do need is words on the page. And that's where things like NaNoWriMo, which is National Novel Writing Month, that went for years and years. I'm not sure if it still exists, but it was a challenge in November to write a 50,000 word novel. I think it was 1,700 words a day that you needed to write. And it became this sort of cult movement of people just trying to smash out a first draft in 30 days. Very few first drafts are going to be in much of a great shape by the end of 1 month. But you've then got 50,000 words that you can then shape. So yeah, use a timer and just get that shitty first draft down to help you move through the block. Taking a small step, block time in your calendar. I'm a terrible one for doing this and then actually just overriding it with something else. But do what you can to ring fence that time and just take that small step. Even 10 minutes can be enough. Just decide what that step is going to be. I'm just going to outline this section. I'm just going to write that one paragraph. I'm just going to record that anecdote. Just one little thing that helps you move through. And if you did that, 3 times a week for the next month, just a little step 3 times a week on your book, you'd have a whole lot more progress and a whole lot more mapped out or written. And you tend to find that once you get some momentum going, you want to keep going. If I've had clients that say, in fact, one said she could only write for 10 minutes a day. She would write every day, but she would only do 10 minutes. And so she'd set the timer and she had to stop at the end of 10 minutes. And what she found was, she was itching to keep going. So she would, at the end of that time, jot down the next 3 points that she wanted to write the following day. And then the next day, come back 10 minutes and smash it out. So find the thing that works for you, that is doable, but that helps you to just take a little step in the right direction. Okay, so structure. So I'm not sure if this one's, oh, hang on, sorry, I've skipped through. Yeah. So this is a more big picture than the question you raised, Emma. But this one is really about, okay, if you've just got a whole lot of material and you're not sure if it's working, you kind of need to sometimes create a visual map. So that might be, if you've got a lot of chapters, print them out and arrange them on the floor. How is this flowing? How does the reader move from one to the other? Do they have what they need to move from one to the other? Or write your topics on post-it notes and stick them on your wall so you can see they move from this to this to this. Does that make sense? Is there anything that's missing? You might like to draw the reader's journey, like a little sort of, like a cute little sort of map, like an arrow moving through. You can illustrate that. You can do what you like on that to see how the reader moves from one thing to another. And for each chapter, ask yourself, what is the purpose? How does this move the reader forward? So you know why you're telling that part of the story or why you're including that information. Now, the other side of structure that I didn't incorporate when I was looking at these is like how, if some of you are writing books where you're bringing together lots of different things. So you might be bringing in statistics, you might be bringing in anecdotes from clients or people that you've talked to, you might be bringing in your own story. So then you've got more of a complex structure of the pieces that you've got, and you can start to feel like maybe the balance isn't quite right. Like, is it overwhelming? Have you got too much of your story? Have you got too much of the reader's story? And so on. You can start to it can get quite complex when you're bringing those things together. So in that situation, I would say come back to a structure for that chapter. So what elements do I need in that chapter to help the reader understand each topic and think about the balance that you've got there? Now that's probably a bit complex for us to digest now. But coming back to, in this chapter, I want to cover this topic. These are the things that will help the reader to get it, and how am I balancing those? Now, in terms of the balance of story and anecdote and other aspects, this is where people can get tripped up as well, because telling our own story can be extremely vulnerable. And um, we are we're living our own story, right? So sometimes the whole of something that happened feels like what we need to share in order to help the reader understand what's going on. But often that's not actually the case. Um, it can help to come back to what is the insight that I want to share here, and what other parts of the story that the reader, of my story, or the story that I'm telling, that the reader needs to hear or understand in order to get that lesson or insight. So often there's all this stuff that happened that might be the truth of the whole truth of the story that happened, right? All of the facts and all of the events around it. But the reader doesn't necessarily need to know all of that level of detail. They just need to know a part of the story to get the essence of it, to understand what happened, to get that insight, to be there in the moment, and to get the emotional resonance of that story. So coming back to what is the insight that I need to share, and what is the detail that will help the reader to get that. And I've said there the minimum amount. You know, each story is different, and we want it to feel alive and to be engaging and enjoyable to the reader. But the point is that you don't need to share everything in order for the reader to get it. You can hold something back for yourself, and you can tell a part of the story that lets them get the essence of the experience and the insight without needing to put your whole life on the line. It often feels like, bloggers or writers are sharing the whole of their existence when they're only actually really sharing a tiny amount of it. So there's an art to that, right? And often we need to tell the whole thing. We need to get the whole thing down on the page before we can strip it back. It's a bit like going on holiday. You put everything out and then you take half of it away and then you pack your suitcase, right? You initially want to take far too much stuff. And it can be like that with sharing our own experiences. We need to get it all down on the page in order to see what is there, and then we can strip it back. Now, and then sometimes there are other stories or examples you can use instead. So you can use examples from clients, you can use examples from interactions that you've had with a stranger on the street. Little conversations can also illustrate that point without it having to be all of your personal story. And then sometimes, if are talking about other people, you can have an experience where you can engage with other family members if they need to read that. And that's on the more personal family stories. That's something to engage with really carefully, and maybe get some support around that, depending on the context. Every story is different, so you've always got to keep yourself safe. But sometimes that can be a useful thing to do, is actually to work with other people before it goes out. I say that with a caveat that every situation is different and you need to think it through and maybe get some support around that. Okay. Now the other thing is a plot walk. So if there's something in your book that isn't working, if you feel like the flow isn't there, the argument doesn't make sense, people are getting lost, a technique I love to share for writers on my retreats is to pair up with someone that you trust, go for a walk, talk out the situation that you're trying to work through, talk out the argument that you're making, and see what questions they ask. There may be some gaps in your narrative. There may be some things that you haven't covered that mean it doesn't make sense. So you can do this for a chapter, or you can do this for the concept as a whole. The questions that other people ask about the work can be really illuminating as to blind spots that you might have. So, yeah, choose your partner, writing partner carefully. It is very easy for our dreams to get squashed. And other writers who are also learning aren't always sometimes are not the best people to offer feedback, right? But on this broad conceptual sense of this is what my book is about, here's what I'm trying to get across, these are the points, that can be really helpful with somebody who is interested, is likely to be someone who would be interested in your topic. I mean, it wouldn't really, I don't know that if I was writing a book about menopause, I don't think I'd take my husband and get him to give me feedback on it, right? So it would be more useful to someone else who's trying to understand and navigate that journey. Um, so yeah, that can be a really useful technique is just to pair up with a friend or another writer and say, hey, can we go for a walk? Can I talk to you about this is what I'm working on? Does it make sense? Okay, why can't I move that on? Okay, so those are the solutions or the options that I've proposed today to help you get unstuck. And so I'd like you to just choose one thing. It could be anything on this list, or it could be something that we haven't discussed that you think will help you get back on track. And if you would share it in the comments on what you'd commit to doing, that would be great. And then we will stop the recording and jump into the Q&A.